I guess what I'm wondering next is like the question of like why would God use evolution in the first place? So we think about this idea of having like an all-powerful, perfect God who can really do anything if in fit with his character. He could like do different ways of creating, like maybe special creation or something like this. But I mean, it seems like if God like why would God use a process like evolution in the first place? Because we've talked about how evolution can enroll in obviously like good things like life and growth and things, but also like suffering and death and all these terrible things. So I believe this like very broad question to you. Like, why would God use a process like evolution in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, I don't have a full answer to it. But if I were to guess, I would sort of say two things. There's that question of why wouldn't God just create heaven first?
Mhm.
I mean, if that's a possibility, why not just go there? And one of the interesting things I think is that even within our tradition, there are certain values that we have here that are not possibilities in heaven. So people don't think that in heaven that we'll be married or have kids, for example. So that seems to be something that is limited to this plane of existence. And so I think that there are goods here that God wanted, and just creating heaven with sort of you know, in individuals that hadn't been through any process seems to be undesirable. But I think in terms of evolution on this earth, I think it's one of the only ways that creation could really have the freedom to make itself. Anything else would involve God's constant stepping in, God's constant um, intervention rather than what I think is the case, which is God's constant being with. So I don't want to get into a sort of a deist view where God's absent, the clockmaker who sort of sets things up and lets things go. But there's an aspect of just as a parent has to let their children take their own course in life and not control everything, I think evolution, in a sense, exemplifies that sort of loving freedom given to the other to be what it is without God directing it and without God forcing it down certain lines. And so, in that process, it both reflects the freedom of God, but I don't think every outcome is exactly as God wanted it. So, when somebody says, do you think God designed a parasite to, eat the eyes of lambs? I'm going, no, I don't think God designed that. I think that that's an occurrence that comes out when creatures are given this sort of freedom that love requires.
Hmm.